Paul, welcome. I feel like this conversation's been a long time coming. Great to have you
Yeah,
on here.
very
It
much so.
has. Do you mind giving a little bit of an introduction into who you are, what you do, and some of your background, just for context for those who are watching or
Yeah,
listening, wherever
cool.
they might be?
Yeah, so I've got just over 17 years recruitment experience, all in the IT sector. Very much a contract recruiter by trade. Worked a couple of niches over the years. Started off in SAP, then I've also worked within the Salesforce.com niche, and then more in recent years in the cybersecurity space. Most of my experience and billing background has been more in continental Europe rather than the UK. I think just by fate rather than anything else. I remember in my first week in recruitment realizing that I was going to be working the SAP market in a German market and did have a little panic thinking I'd just accepted a new job working in a market where I didn't speak a word of the language. So I remember having quite an uncomfortable conversation with my new manager, thinking, how has this happened? Then realized I didn't need German at all, because it's very much an English international environment. And never looked back. I realized quite quickly that certainly if you compare the German economy to the UK, it's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit more, certainly when I was working in German technology, which SAP is, it was the right move. And I then found within that area my little specialism of the Swiss market, which was great. The cost of living there is and rates being paid are some of the highest in Europe. Maybe some of the Nordic countries compete, but I love the Swiss market. I got a really good understanding of the complex work permit situation because it's not an EU country, but EU members can work there with the correct permit. So I've got a really good understanding of that, how people's taxes are worked out regarding from canton to canton, which is equivalent of a county in the UK. And yeah, done really, really well. And I loved that market, to be honest. It suited my style of being a recruiter. The Swiss market, they very much want to sort of see and feel the people they're working with rather than just one phone call, give you the business. You built reputations and rapport with people over some time. My biggest client I've ever had in recruitment, I probably had a relationship with the key hiring manager for almost a year before I'd done any business with him. And the irony was that we both had babies born at a very similar time, was a little bit of a neutral grounds. We both took some time off for paternity leave and had a joke about sort of not really getting a paternity leave because you're always checking your phone, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And we then went from there, and it was a great experience. I then got to a point where I was visiting the client so regularly. I was in their office once a month, once every other month, and I got a really good understanding of how many phone calls a key hiring manager gets in a weekly basis
Recruiters or just phone calls?
from recruiters. It was really eye-opening. I because they weren't a well-known company, so it wasn't like I was working with Accenture or IBM or anything. They were quite a relatively small end client, but very much cash rich. And it was fascinating for how many calls they got. And it was really good for me to sort of pick some nuggets out from the really good ones and the really bad ones when you're sitting almost on the desk with your hiring manager. So that was a really good sort of learning curve for me, I think, to be honest. So that was good. Then after that, I then decided that I wanted to go into the management route, challenging at the start because you've got that balancing act between being a billing manager and a manager. So your time management is absolutely crucial in those periods of when you're prioritizing your own billings, when you're prioritizing the development of the team. That's not easy. And I think, in my opinion, the job role of a billing manager in recruitment is, I think, one of the hardest jobs, to be honest, because it's your time management is really got to be on point. Then I've gone on and managed more sort of larger scale teams in a non-billing perspective, which I've always enjoyed. Comes with the good, the bad, the ugly of scaling a team. At peak, I think I had 15, 16 direct reports. That takes time to get that team in shape. You don't just hire 16 people and they all work out. It doesn't. And you've then, even with the team you've got different personalities, different styles of working, different level of experience. And it's a real juggling act. I had some people in my team who would want support literally every minute of every day. And that was because they wanted it as a security blanket. Some needed the support because they were a junior, and I had other people in the team who almost didn't want the support, which was fine. They were completely self-sufficient. And then all I needed then was the visibility of their pipeline, their forecasting. And if ever they were off holiday sick, everyone's entitled to time off over the year, I'm able to pick up their desk and fill the gap in their absence. And that was my role. Then later on, I've gone into more doing my own thing from thereafter, to be honest. But yeah, and that's my path. I don't know where the 17 years have gone really, but it doesn't feel like it at all. But yeah, I suppose I've got quite a few years under my belt now.
Good. I want to dive into that in more detail, because you can imagine there's people that are watching who they're going to be at different stages in their recruitment journey. There's some who are like thinking about getting into recruitment. There's some that are going to be thinking about starting their own company. There's some who have already started and they're just in the earlier phases. And then there's people who are established and they want to grow to a certain level that that maybe they just haven't achieved just yet. So
Yeah.
I just want to get some context behind that. Are you comfortable sharing like your billing numbers, like in your peaks in each different stage of the journey, that because you've been a recruiter, you've been a billing manager, a non-billing
Yeah.
manager, now your own company as well. Do you mind sharing like
Yeah,
the
so my
peaks of your billing?
best year billing on my own was just over 750 sterling, but obviously I worked the European market, which I think at the time exchange rates just nudged €1 million. But that took me four 4.5 years to get there. That didn't come overnight. And it's funny, and I remember people telling me this when I first started, and I've really struggled to get my head around it, that the job becomes easy when you're billing. The hardest I've ever worked in the industry was probably the first year, 18 months. And I didn't have a huge amount to show for it. And then all of a sudden it dropped into place. As I said earlier, the client I went on to be my biggest client, I had a complete open dialogue with him for way over a year before I did any billing with him. And the client had been a little bit on my radar for even longer. I think I was past an internal lead within the business regarding the client having some form of hiring need in the SAP space. And I just tracked it. I kept my notes of the conversations beforehand and went back to those notes afterwards and then just built it from there. So it didn't come overnight. And then from a management aspect of it, my probably best year in terms of billing was 1.4 for a team.
Sterling?
And again, pardon?
1.4 million sterling.
Sterling. Yeah, that's sterling.
Cool.
And again, that's come with a lot of time. Some of those accounts I brought in, some of those accounts I inherited within the business. Yeah, it takes time. And I think probably best tip I'd give people starting off is that yes, recruitment can be lucrative, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I think at the beginning, it's quite hard to get your head around that. I found it difficult. Whereas working with people who they looked as if they were so far ahead of me, it felt like I would never get there because it seemed so far away and you're doing all the work, you're doing everything you're being asked to do, and you don't feel like you're making any progress, even though everyone was telling me, yes, you're doing all the right things, just keep going consistency, and trust the process. I think was the scenario. What was really drummed into me was if you're following the process correctly, be consistent with it and it pays off. And it's probably something what has actually stuck with me still today. I'm quite process driven in the way I work. And yeah, I think it is. One of the first mentors I had was a German girl who was very process driven. And I just followed her lead, to be honest. And I think it keeps you organized. You know what you're doing. You can then measure if you've had a good day or not, because if you've got your process correct, you know what you should be doing outbound, and the rest of it should actually fall into place. And I was taught as well, which is something I've always tried to sort of pass on, is that don't focus on the end goal of the deal and the revenue, because that's the result of your work beforehand. Focus on how many calls you've made in a week, how many new managers you've highlighted, how many candidates you've spoken to, any bits of market information, how many leads you picked up. That's what you need to measure, not your billings, because your billings actually look after themselves. Once you get, if you've got all those bits in play, the rest of it is just time. Because if you put the right CVs in front of the right managers, it's only a matter of time until people start buying them.
That's it.
That's probably it, really. I've never really tried to reinvent the wheel.
You probably heard me say it. It's like there's a level of patience and grit that comes with it, but like you can't force someone to hire, and you can't force somebody to change jobs. But if you become the go-to expert in that niche, in that market over a period of time, then you become the only option for them to turn to when the time is right. So just focus on becoming the expert. Everything else will fall in place. Would you agree with that?
100%, 100%. And so many people I've worked with over the years, different companies, different stuff, that's always been the common ground. And it's that, yes, I've seen people, but I've also seen people who have come in and hit the ground running and done deals straight away. That's almost come back and bit them a little bit, because they then get overconfident with it. Their process isn't nailed down behind, and then they have this great start and then it falls off. From a management perspective, I was always slightly, obviously, if someone would come and do deals, great, cool. That obviously helps my P&L from straight away. Brilliant, we're ahead of the curve. But I always was more, I'd be less worried really if someone just came in and just followed the process from day one, because and it was executed correctly, because I was then thinking, well, actually, this is probably now more of a long-term billing head rather than someone that's going to come in, do a few quick deals, realize the process isn't there. That point, they could be ingrained into doing something wrong because they've had the success, a little bit of luck, which is fine. I think most recruiters do have a little bit of luck along the way. I certainly have, without a doubt. Some of my clients, there has been an element of luck, but you put yourself in the right place to get the luck, I guess. Yeah, I think so. You've got to be a little bit determined. You've got to be thick-skinned with it, and know your why was something I was always doing as well, of knowing why you want to do it.
And would you say for you your why is because you absolutely love recruitment, or is there like personal drivers like family and so on?
Yeah, for me, I use recruitment as a vehicle. Do I enjoy the job? I suppose I must do 17 years later, but I don't think I would be someone to say I love recruitment, because if I did, I'd probably get to the end of the week and think I hate this job because something would go wrong, because that's the nature of the beast. So no, I've always used it as a vehicle for me to be able to do the things I want to do in etc. Like me and you are car fans. Well, they're a little bit of my Achilles heel in life, but they're my driver. They're what drive me, excuse the pun. But everyone's got different motivations, to be honest. And when I've had people in my team, people I work with, it's always interesting to find out what their why is. Sometimes you get people very much aligned with you. Sometimes they can be completely opposite, but that's okay, long as they know why they're turning up on a Monday morning, why they're working late on a Friday night. And I think that's the key part. It doesn't matter what your driver is, what you want to do with the finances side of it. Everyone's got their own agendas in life, but knowing why is super, super key.
I wanna touch on a few things that you've mentioned. Like you said your best client took a year's worth of a relationship before you actually got going with them, which is that's a long process. Okay.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I recently ran some stats in our recruitment company, and I realized that obviously we're 10 years into the business, so I've got a decent data set now. 10 years in, and I can say that on average, our clients spend about 200K with us on average. There's some accounts that are on the lower end, and there's some accounts that are on the higher end of it. And if they're spending, now that I've got that data and I look back at the 10 years and I think, okay, if on average we're going to get 200K worth of business of a certain profile of a client, I'm happy to be patient and spend even 100K just to acquire that client, because I know I'm going to get 200K. I'm going to get there's 100% profit margin on that. So there's a level of patience that I have now running a recruitment business 10 years in, and you've seen it as well over that
Mm.
period of time. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out and they're like, they're in that position where they're thinking like, when's the first placement going to come through? Like, when are we going to get this first deal over the line? Because that first one is critical. And I'm gonna ask you that question first. And I'm gonna come on to something else a little bit later.
Yeah. I think the first tip I'd give someone really starting off now is, as I said just now, I don't think I would focus on, you got to try your best not to focus on the first deal, the first round, because that's your result. And it's super, super difficult at the beginning because you want to just know you can do the job. You want that one over the line, and it is super difficult not to focus on it. But you've really got to try not to, because as I said, it's the end result. Some of the clients I've tracked for a while, there's always been a stepping stone on it. Like for this example I had, the client had implemented one of the big four consultancies to implement the whole SAP landscape in the business. And he knew it was going wrong because they were paying premium rates for the premium headline consultancy, but they weren't actually delivering what they were being charged for. So he went through the process of explaining to the board that the project wasn't anywhere near where it needed to be in terms of milestone. He had to justify the cost and how little he had behind it. Then he had to have the confidence in a new strategy, which what he actually did is he came away from the security of having a big consultancy who takes on all the risk, which he then realized the risk actually wasn't worth the paper it was written on when he really drilled down into that agreement, to then take on the project himself. So his job title was head of IT, I think, yeah, or CIO. He then wanted to take the control back to say, right, well, I've got, because what he had was this project was being run. He had no idea what was going on. So what he did then was, right, take the project back, hire the right people for the role, not youngsters who had a couple of years under their belt but happened to be working permanent for one of the big consultancies. And I remember him saying to me, Paul, I want the guys with a few grey hairs and a few stresses of strains of previous projects, because I want to buy in that experience. And that's why it took so long, because it was quite a big process. It's not easy to disinstruct one of the big consultancies when they're in board. This is why that's why these companies make the money they do. Once they're in for life. But he did. And when we then went through what the hiring needs with him, it wasn't just the technical skills he needed, it was the soft skills. It was someone who knew how to pick up a project which hadn't gone particularly well with one of the big consultancies, but still had that understanding of working with an end client in the mixture of the consultancy environment, where they could come with their own ideas because they've got 10, 15 years behind them in their specialist area, but could still work within a larger scale team. Because you could have the problem of someone who's been doing it for 15 years, who comes in, they know the answers, they've got the stress and the strain, but they're also quite headstrong on a way of doing it. That wasn't going to quite work either. And that, yeah, it took time to get the right profiles. And I really had to understand the environment, to understand who was going to be a right fit for the role or not. And when it came to sort of delivering on those CVs, I did have a delivery team that would support me. And sometimes I just had to go with my gut with, do I think this individual is going to get on with my hiring manager, who by this point I knew quite well. And I knew how we operate, I knew how we communicated. And I was thinking, will their characters fit? So sometimes I wouldn't send the candidate for the role because I would be like, he's just not going to get on with the hiring manager. And I would say that to the manager, say, look, I've spoken to this candidate, this. This is my gut feeling, is why I don't think this guy's right. If you still want to speak to him, it's absolutely fine. I can set it up. But I'm confident and I understand your environment. I don't think he's right for your role on the soft skills. But again, that took time. And after a couple of years, when we were getting it right, he would really just go with my judgment, to be honest. He would still want to see the profiles, but if I'd say to him, look, I'm not sending this one, or I don't recommend you interview this one first because of soft skills. He would generally go, fine, you know the environment here, Paul. A lot of the people already on the site you've placed, so you know their characters as well. And it wasn't really important to get the right team environment. But that comes with time.
Mm. But I can tell from the way that you're talking, you've got a really deep rooted understanding of the market, the industry, the client, what they were looking for. How, I'm guessing that's what you were learning for the year or so that you had this relationship.
Yeah.
How
And
important
ongoing.
was that?
Oh, super important to understand. And the bit what was really important to me, which I did have help with this, is that whenever I had those follow-up calls with the manager, I always came with something relevant to him.
Mm,
So even though I knew he was going through this quite long process, there was a period where I'd say, well, can I just spec you a CV of what's available in the market now so you compare to what the consultancy's given you today?
mm,
And there was a couple which he did have a couple informal conversations with. I knew he wasn't ready to hire them. I knew. And I just thought, well, if I just keep adding value of this, and I was helping him because he was able to use those profiles, those conversations he had to escalate it internally within the business and to really push back on the consultancy of, well, you're charging me XYZ and I'm getting this. I can go to the open market, probably have 20-30% saving because these big consultancies are not cheap.
mm,
And I'm going to get the guy who can actually genuinely do the job because his CV has worked in almost an identical environment. So it was adding value, which sometimes is quite hard to get your head around because you feel like you're doing everything and you want to actually get something back from it. But I played the long game.
mm. Clearly. And I don't know, it paid off, obviously. So,
Yeah. And most of those runners were on that project for about 3 years. So I think everyone won in the end, to be honest. Once we got it in there, the hiring manager probably turned the project round for himself on a personal level. So it was good for him. It was good for me. It was good for the company I worked for. But even the contractors, they were there yeah, most of them were there for 3 years. So it was stable work for a contractor. And the contracting market, contractors are paid a premium because they take the risk and reward of having sometimes not working for a couple of months. Well, these guys had 3 years plus secured work and they was able to put a successful project on their CV at the end of the day. So I think everyone won in the end.
good, good. It's nice hearing these stories. I'm sure you got a lot of praises from the candidates and from the clients. So I suppose that's one of the rewarding elements in recruitment is when you get that little thank you note saying, "Hey, look, man, this job has changed my life," or "This job has really helped out massively."
Yeah,
So, and it's something that a lot of recruiters, even in the darkest moments, you get those little messages just saying, "Look, I just want to say thank you for this." It goes such a long way. Not that you get paid for the thank you note, but that thank you note just means a lot, and I know
yeah,
what that feels like.
yeah, it's good. And there was a couple of occasions where I went on site with a client and I would take the team out for lunch from a sort of a business perspective. And yeah, you get to know the guys quite well, to be honest, over 3 years, because I always try to not just be the guy who chased them for a timesheet every month or just bleed them for information. You try to have a little bit of rapport with them, a little bit more beyond that. And yeah, at 3 years, you can't help get get to know each other, to be honest. So yeah, it was quite good. And yeah, when a project goes well, everyone wins, don't they?
Mm,
But I think that's the beauty of sort of the contracting markets where clients can actually hire the right person rather than hiding behind a consultancy model thinking they've got the safety aspect of it. They're actually paying more money for it.
mm, mm. You're right. You're right. I'm curious to know because I can tell that you you've really enjoyed that experience that you've had in recruitment and you've really got to grips with it. One thing that comes up often is like finding your passion, like this talk about finding your passion. I want to give you my take on it and then you can give me yours on it as well. I believe that the only reason why you find passion in something is because you find a level of success in it. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Like you don't find your passion before you become successful. It's you do the work and then when you become successful you become passionate about it.
yeah,
And sometimes people say, oh, there's kids that are like really young and then they get into, I don't know, playing an instrument or something like that, they become really passionate about it. No, they didn't start off perfect playing instruments. They it's just their parents picked up on it at a young age, and they've had a longer period of time to really get to grips with it. And then, okay, they might have started when they were 8 years old, and then when they turn 16, it's like they actually become really good at it. And because they're really good at it, they become passionate at it as well. But they're still the best part of a 5 to 6 year journey before they became passionate. Would you say that's the same for recruitment, where there's a load of grit that goes into it at the earlier stages, but as soon as you start making those consistent placements, you see the clients, you got the relationships, you become embedded in your niche. Now all of a sudden it's like you love what you do, not because you were always good at it, you became good at it, and that's why you love it. So the passion comes
Yeah,
later rather than finding it right at the beginning.
yeah, yeah. Hitting it on the head. I think so. I think for me, it certainly is that way. I wouldn't say I'm naturally the best recruiter I've come across. I know a handful of people who I would say are naturally much better than me in a job. I was always the guy what was happy to work hard and graft. I did enjoy that part of it, but you do get the ups and downs. That first 12, 18 months were very, very difficult, but I had a good team around me, to be honest. Good managers, good colleagues who have become friends for life these years later, who you can always still pick up the phone and vent, rant, which you sometimes need. You need someone to share the good and the bad experiences with in those early days. But yeah, once it starts to pay off, then it all feels worth it. And I think that's when you enjoy it, is when you start reaping the rewards of the hard work. To be honest, you start seeing the commission coming through, and what that then gives you outside of work. It doesn't take too much, then put a smile on your face.
That's it. That's it. I'll mention this quickly because you said that you gelled with a client because you had a baby at a similar time. For those who have watched my other videos, I shared a few times where I started my recruitment agency on a shoestring budget. I basically had 2 months worth of runway in terms of covering my living expenses, and then I made a placement pretty quickly, and then I didn't make any for nearly 4 months. And I won't share the full details, but basically there was a point in time where I felt like I should close down the business. Like it wasn't going as planned. I should just go and get a job and then start again. And that was because I basically had 2 weeks worth of money left, and I also had a baby due in the 2 week time frame as well. Except that night when I thought about it, my wife nudged me and she's baby's on the way. I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. But I made the best part of 25K in placement fees on that day, and it was on that day, obviously Mrs. in labor, I'm going outside taking phone calls, trying to close these deals. And there was a moment in time which I remember very well. I forgot to put my phone on silent, and it was just ringing and ringing and ringing. And it was a client calling me, telling me that they wanted to offer a candidate. So
Mm.
when I called them back, I told them, I was like, look, I didn't pick up because we were just in the process of having a baby, and baby's out now, good and well. And we carried on working with that same client for 7 or so years, and there was a few placements every single year for 7 years after that. And yeah, I had a similar experience as well. So I'm curious to know, when you look back, and this, I just want to give some gems to anybody who's watching or listening. From your experience of billing 750K in a year,
Yep.
if you could condense what you believe is like your most valuable knowledge into either a 30 or a 60-second phrase or words of wisdom within 30 seconds, what would you say?
Oh, what of how to get there?
Yeah.
Uh,
So think of somebody who's not billing 750K. What
yeah.
would you say to them?
Keep going. Patience, something I'm not blessed with naturally, as you know personally. Keep doing the right things consistently, daily, and find someone who you can always use as a checkpoint. I've always been quite good at this, certainly in the years of going to someone and say, right, beginning of the week, I said I was going to do this, 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 this. I think I've done it. Can you almost check my work? And I was always very comfortable with that. It's consistency, patience, and trust in the process. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help wherever you can get it. All different sources. I don't think they matter. Again, I've come to you for a sounding board on plenty of occasions where I just want a second opinion on something. It could be quite small, it can be quite key, but yeah, patience, trust the process, and consistency.
Cool. And then if I ask the exact same question for somebody who's an experienced recruiter and now looking to grow to 1.4 million a year or beyond, from your experience, same question again. What would you
Same
tell them?
answer. It's the exact same process. There is actually no difference.
Even when it comes to hiring?
Yeah, trust the process. Trust the process of your hiring. Have a hiring process and trust it, and trust your gut. It's funny actually. I've met up with some of the people who first set up the recruitment company I first worked for, which we had an incredible working environment there. We really did, and I saw something of an interview of them of being asked how did they do so well in their hiring process. And one of the key questions they had in there was, would I go to lunch with this individual? And they hired people from all over Europe. So you got a complete different European cultures and put them all into an office in central London. But the question was, would I still go to lunch with this individual?
During the interview or like a week
No,
later?
no, it was just one of their questions where they would, at the end of the interview, they would say, "Okay, I've just interviewed Mo. He's gone through all these questions, good answers. Right. Would I go to lunch with this person and enjoy their company?" And it was one of their key non-negotiables because they were like, "Well, if the answer's no, they're not going to gel into the business."
Mm, you're right.
Um, and yeah, so I think it is the same set of questions from scaling a team, but yeah, you trust in the process. The process might be slightly different in terms of hiring. But that also goes if you've got the wrong person, if you've got your process correct of why they should succeed and something's out of sync, trust the process you've put together. I know you've got a very detailed onboarding training program, so it's black and white. If someone hasn't followed those steps, which you've set them and you back yourself that you set them up to succeed and they haven't, then it's not you, it's the individual, and that's okay. But
Mm,
you've got to have that process behind. I know you've had a couple of it as well where you've got it. If you've got it, so if you invest your time in nailing that down, I think your process on that is better than mine. Then you've set the individual up to succeed, and if they don't succeed, then it's not you, and you just carry on and finding the next one who will succeed. And I think that's it. But it's still patience. It's still the consistency that doesn't change.
mm.
Doesn't change.
That risk of making a loss along the way still comes along because I think we had it recently. Like interviewed somebody, thought he was a brilliant guy, ticked all the boxes, and we let him go in his first week. Like I wish him all the best, obviously, but I could tell that somebody had joined the company, but they hadn't joined the team. If that
Yeah.
made sense.
Yeah.
And once upon a time, I would have said, okay, cool, we should test it for another week and so on. And this was like, okay, cool. No, this was it. Like I've been through this journey a few times and we've made a few mistakes from a hiring perspective, probably hired the wrong people at the wrong time. I don't think there's anybody that I've hired who I think really badly off. Like I didn't think that they were bad recruiters. It's just, for what I wanted to build in the recruitment company, like they just weren't a right fit. And some people took a little bit longer before we figured it out. And then with experience, now it's like you can figure people out within a week or a month. And
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I've said for a long time now, give me a week with someone, sort of one to one very closely, and I'll tell you on Friday afternoon if I think they're right or
mm,
wrong. But I'm looking at things of, are they engaged with the business? Are they engaged with the team, which is what you just said then? And are they following the process you've mapped out for them? That's all you can really look for in those really early days. But if you haven't got three ticks, they're probably not going to work out, because
mm,
someone once said to me is the best any team member is ever going to be in your team in terms of their output is their first week, their first month, their first 90 days. And then after that, people get comfortable and everyone naturally takes that slide down. So if you've got a doubt after week one, you're probably not going to turn it around.
mm,
And that was very quite good advice. And I hadn't thought of it until someone actually just put it on the table for me, thinking, well, if they're doing this, which is not correct in week one, what are they going to be like 90 days' time when they're almost ingrained in the business, slightly more comfortable? The best you're going to get is week one. People always turn up the most smartly dressed on their first day, and by 2 years down the line, all of a sudden it's slightly loosened off. So that was one of those things I always tried not to forget. It's more difficult if you actually build quite a rapport with the individual where you actually like them as an individual, which does happen. That's all normally the case. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have hired them in the first place. But you know it's not working, and then you've got that business decision head on rather than the personal one. And they're always difficult ones when you actually genuinely get on with the individual, but you just know it's not working out for both parties there. And then I've always tried to just be upfront with people, be honest, even if it's really hard for you to do. When you're in a management role, it's sort of what you're paid to make that decision. But yeah, I think that's it from a team perspective. And then probably your time management is probably got to be that little bit more on point when you're managing, because you've got to also set the standard for the team. If you're not going to do it yourself and not going to be accountable yourself, I think it's quite difficult to get people to buy into you if you can't do it yourself. You can't add value to them. Where if I was a billing manager, I had to lead from the front myself, which sometimes is really difficult to do both. And then when you're in a non-billing role, you've got to add value. If you all of a sudden add value to someone else's desk, their billings, they'll buy into you. If you're adding value, like it could be that they need you to come on a call with them for a second opinion, go to a face-to-face meeting, or help them out with just closing a deal. It can be anything, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's probably it from the management side.
I want to ask a question relating to it because you touched on processes as well. I've seen it happen a few times. I made this mistake, and I've even had conversations with some people who have thought this was the right way to go about it. And I want to get your view on it. You know, sometimes recruiters, they will, whether they're experienced or not, irrelevant of that. Let's say you're now making 100 to 200K a year. You're a profitable business, basically. If you're working on your own, I don't believe you need to have running costs that are higher than 1K a month. That's regardless of whether it's pounds, dollars, or euros. So if you're spending more than that, you're overspending on useless stuff, basically.
Yeah,
Certainly the way that I've shared it anyway. So if your running costs for 12 grand a year and you're making 150K, like you got the best part of over 100K that you can pay yourself,
yeah,
and you're doing fine. What a lot of people do, or I say a lot in the sense that I tried it, I know other people have tried it. What sometimes people do is they will say, okay, well, I'm doing 150, 200K a year. I'm going to hire another recruiter that does 150, that is capable of doing 150, 200K a year, and I'm just going to repeat that process until I hit 1, 2, even 3 million, whatever it might be. I've found that what you end up building is a people-led business rather than a process-led business. And that means that each one of those people comes in with their own ideas about how do we win clients, how do we get candidates, how do we secure deals, and all of that stuff. And now you have like a disjointed business where it's led by people, and the moment that person leaves, everything collapses underneath that person's desk. And even if somebody comes in play to replace that person, they
yeah.
can't pick it up from where they left off because they don't understand how everything has been managed.
Mm.
And the other option is to have a process-led business where you have a designated client acquisition strategy, one for acquiring candidates, a sales process, an onboarding process like you mentioned earlier. Like all of these things come in play. Now it's a case
Yeah.
of it's irrelevant whether the person is either good or bad or even experienced at recruitment. It's like as long as they do this, it can't fail. And that's the level that you want to get at least your own confidence to before you actually begin to hire. That's my take on it. What do you think about that? Do you think hiring a recruiter as your first hire is a good decision, a bad decision, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's the bit. I think it's the process and the culture you want to have, because what you never want to get in a position is where you've got someone in your team where yes, they've got good billings, etc., but they've almost feel like they've got you over a barrel a little bit, where they're not doing what they should be doing and they're not creating the right culture they should be. So they become tricky from there. I think the culture plays into that a little bit as well, where someone can, if someone does leave for whatever reason, there's always 101 reasons why people move on from businesses, but the business doesn't suffer, where it can be taken on behind. But I think sort of the culture of the team, and I think if I look at some of mine over the past, is that I always use a bit of a team and a football analogy on it. That you had your strikers, who were your guys who were always going to do very well because it was just in their DNA. But you also had your midfielders and your steady eddies, and that was okay. And I think sometimes there's a balance between trying to put a steady eddy into a different category, which they're not comfortable with, they won't like, but that can still work. I think you sometimes need the blend of both. If you've got too many of the same type of character in a team, I think that can work against you. If you look at most sports teams, and I'm big into football, you have different characters playing different roles. And I think that was also key as well, is that some people will only do 1 to 2 deal a month, but they'll be as regular as clockwork and they'll be very low maintenance to you as a management aspect of it. You may get someone who's going to be quite high maintenance, which you can fill in your own blanks on that, and they'll put in 4 deals a month. But you've got to find that balance. But you should never be in a scenario where if someone leaves the business that the business suffers. There should always be able to be a process behind it to pick it up.
Hmm. I'm gonna. I really appreciate you sharing all of that because I think there's a lot of wisdom that you've been able to distill, and I'm going to continue that throughout the rest of this conversation as well. I'm curious to know though, you're a 750K a year biller yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't built that much in my own, like in any 1 year recruiting myself.
Yep.
You also built a team up to 1.4 million a year.
Yep.
For a lot of people, that's like the goal. They would say,
Yep.
okay, cool, we hit 1.4 million a year, like we've cracked a million, we're good. I'm gonna hang my boots up. I'm gonna start, doing all sorts of random stuff and buy the fancy car and start living a luxury life and so on. Like this is everything that I wanted. You've been there. Why did you ask for my help?
Yeah, because I was doing something different. When I decided that I was going to, so all these figures I've done in the past, they've been in quite big established businesses, and it's a totally different job. So I probably learned that a little bit the hard way in the early days, if I'm honest. But I was also very open to having people around me who I could bounce off ideas. Over the years, there's been a handful of people who have helped me, be it be managers, mentors, directors, owner of the businesses, who have always been able to give a little bit of guidance, their input. And I was always keen to get that experience. I've never been the guy for, oh, I know well, I don't think I have. Others might think different, that I know everything about everything. But before we got in contact last year, I'd had an appetite for a while for two things. I was looking for a business coach, business mentor who could help guide me in actually structuring and scaling my own business, because it is different when you're doing something in your own business. It does sometimes change your thought process, rather than when it's someone else's company. You're going to feel every bump in the road, and I think that sometimes it does cloud your judgment. And then secondly, the AI and automation, the industry for me has absolutely changed in the last few years. Doing exactly what I would have been taught to do 17 years ago today would be incredibly difficult. Are there still people who do very well work in a very traditional way? Yes, of course there is. But the world is changing, the industry has changed, and I'd had an appetite or I'd had my eye on the changes in the industry with the AI and automation. And this came to me a couple of years ago, where I was asked to sort of oversee a relatively junior business development team, but people who probably were going to listen, and that's half the battle. And all I was tasked to do for a week was just listening to all of their phone calls. Sometimes, like, I could be live in the call, and I could almost sort of coach someone in the moment of what to do to pick up roles, etc., etc. And I remember that going home that week thinking, wow, these guys actually really did commit to the week. They really did. A bunch of good, like, young lads. They really did try. We made it fun as well. And I purposely planned the week before to make it as fun as possible, with sort of spot incentives. And yeah, we made it as we had a bit of fun as well. But I definitely went home thinking, wow, that's changed. I've got bags of experience over these guys, and it was the ratio of dial-outs, the people just physically answering the phone, had shifted massively.
As in
And
how many calls they were making or how many people were
how many
picking up?
dial-outs for someone just to pick up the phone, let alone actually pitch someone and have a positive phone call, pick up a requirement? That's further down the line. It was just that process. And I think the change from COVID and the work from home and the hybrid played a part in there. And then it made me think that there's a different way of doing this. And I'd seen quite a lot on sort of social media and LinkedIn of this slightly different way of working. And I sort of had been tracking it for a little while. A lot of people, I bounced the idea off some people. Some people said to me, well, yeah, I think this might work in a couple of years' time. Some people said, oh, that's absolute rubbish. There's no excuse to just pick up the phone and smash it all day long. Old school's the best school, blah, blah, blah. But more it went on, more I thought, I think there's something in this, because I watched loads of videos on YouTube, joined a couple of webinars, and I thought, okay, there is something in this process and it's not going away. And then I thought, if people tell me this is going to happen in a couple of years' time, why don't I just jump in now? If I'm doing my own thing, which could be quite a tough market post-COVID, why would I not do this now? And that's when I sort of found you, and you sort of killed two birds with one stone. And the automation thing has been, yeah, it's changed the way I work in some capacity. You see loads of things on social media where people plug in all these automation things, sit back on the beach and collect the money. That's not true. That's not true. You might be there 6 to 10 years time. If you build it correctly with all the process, you might be, and good luck to you. But if people think that happens from day one for when you just go and sign up to a platform, you're in for a horrible surprise. Because yes, for me, there are people who already I can see are over automating because there's an element of laziness coming in. The automation thing is, if you get it right, and it took me more than one attempt to get this right, it's all of those correct processes in the old school way of working, of those repetitive tasks you got now, right? Like things like specking out NPC campaigns. You've got to have the email absolutely on point before you send it. And that doesn't matter if you're sending it old school or you're doing it through cold email outreach. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be a piece of art in terms of your delivery and knowing exactly who you're going to send it to and why that's a hook to them. Because you could have all these processes in play, but if you send the wrong CV to the wrong person, it doesn't matter if it's the automated process is actually just going to make it worse.
Yeah.
So it's all of those type of things. Do they make my job easier? One hand, yes. The other hand, I think it's just a new norm. I come in, sort of one of my tasks on a Monday morning is seeing what's connected with me with LinkedIn of interest. I got campaigns working, which are both client focused and candidate. Sometimes I switch between the two depending on what I'm needing. Fine. But the scenario of actually qualifying the candidate for the role, making sure the CV mirrors with exactly what they've told me, that hasn't changed. I still do that part of the job. That's not changed. You saw these things where automation starts screening the CV or a bot starts doing the first round of interviews. I don't think I'm ready for that. And I don't know if the recruitment industry will come away from that personal touch. I still think people buy from people. You're just using a bit of an engine behind the scenes, getting someone to accept an offer where you know they've got 3 or 4 opportunities on the table. I don't think any automated process is going to get rid of that problem for you or challenge. That's a personal selling skill, and that interaction with a manager, the rapport you build with a manager to give you the role and not one of your competitors. That's a human touch. That's nothing to do with AI. It's just the background work which I wanted to do, and it's worked. It didn't work overnight. It takes time. I got a little bit impatient at the beginning because I was like a little bit, as you know, a little bit rabbit in the headlights and thinking, wow, this is going to change how I'm going to work overnight. It has changed the way I've worked, but it's took 6 months plus for it to get there. And again, comes back to my first point with it being in the normal thing, patience.
Absolutely. I want to touch on something because, like you mentioned, AI automation as well. You said years ago, and you didn't tell me how many years ago, but you said years ago you were in contact with this hiring manager and they were just getting non-stop phone calls from recruiters, and
Yeah,
I'm guessing it was just ignoring them, yeah, basically,
yeah,
because you just knew who they are.
yeah,
Now, once upon a time, that was the only way to get in contact with clients. Like cold
yeah,
calling was the way.
yeah,
And not to say that cold calling doesn't work, but I believe that there's a diminishing return now, because if you consider, this is just my take on it, if you consider how many times you cold call somebody and they could
yeah,
be away, they could be on leave, they could be on holiday, they could be in a meeting, like heck, on lunch, on the toilet, like all the gruesome examples that you can think of.
yeah,
There's 101 reasons why they just wouldn't pick up. And
yeah,
worst case scenario is that they recognize your number and now they're just going to ignore you permanently.
yeah,
You could be cold calling for, I can still remember trying to cold call through to a client, and it was like a year before they even picked up the phone.
mm,
So I noticed that shift as well, because 10 years ago, well, 13 years ago when I started in recruitment, cold calling and job boards were the only ways to do recruitment. And
yeah,
then LinkedIn came about, and this is like before they had premium accounts, and LinkedIn looked like it basically looked like an old black and white newspaper at one point.
yeah,
And you can send an unlimited amount of connections, but nobody knew what do you say, what do you do, how do you convert that into a conversation. And that was like LinkedIn when it came out, it was like, okay, this is amazing. Then they started adding in the premium features, okay, this is even better, and it got better
yeah,
and better. And now there's an element of crowdedness that comes into that as well.
yeah.
So now when you consider that an AI is taking a route with emails and with cold calling as well nowadays, what's your take on cold calling?
It can still be there to an extent. And I think I saw something the other day actually, which I've actually sort of used a little bit into my own sales pattern. That the industry is probably going, or I think not probably, has gone through its third evolution. You've got the early days of up to probably including the 90s, where it was smashing a phone with the yellow pages and pitching managers and sending CVs via a fax machine. You then had the LinkedIn era and the digital revolution, I think people call it, where LinkedIn comes in. I remember first starting when that came in when I started, and it was frowned upon to be using LinkedIn during core hours. It was really frowned
Yeah,
upon as well. It
what
was
are you
also
doing
like,
on Facebook basically were the kind of
yeah,
comments you get. Yeah.
exactly. And the money's on the phone, not on a social media.
Yeah.
And I remember sort of the boom of the recruiter aspect of LinkedIn, where people are like, oh, you can message people without being first connected. This is a game. And we laugh now, but that did happen. And then that took us up to probably more sort of the last 5 years, where it's moved again, where it's the AI revolution of it. I still think parts of the job are still there. If you can't get someone together you've sent it, like, again, you said about trying to hire a manager for the first time. There's some statistics where you've sometimes got to chase a sales lead 7 times before it becomes a sale. You could put that into email campaigns. You don't just send one email, cold email outreach, and then just follow it up. You follow it up with the same mentality as you would if you were
Mhm.
on the phone. And sometimes if I can get the individual's number, why would I not try? Oh, I've sent you a couple of emails. Yes, I've got them. It's still there. That hasn't changed. It's added rather
Mm.
than sent away. But if you were starting off now, would you do the classic 2 hours on the phone as an absolute core minimum? I don't know. I don't know.
I could tell you I wouldn't.
I don't think I
Yeah, I
want
wouldn't.
to do it, if I'm honest. I'd be interested to see the real black and white data on that. If you had two people, exact same experience, same markets, one's doing the phone, one's doing automation to do that legwork at the beginning, who would get better results over a 6 to 12 month period? I'll be fascinated to see it. I think I know where the answer would be.
What do you think it'd be?
It'd be the automation, because I think the other person would have actually probably have just given up. I think, to be honest, well, I
It,
think I might have in today's thing, but the person that's got the automated is going to cover so much more ground.
you were on the group call. You might remember it when there's these two guys. I think both of us agree that they're going to be so successful running the recruitment business because the way that they're heading. But they said on the call, Mohammed, we're only working 6 hours a day. We're getting all this stuff done. contact. We're having like four to five client meetings every single week, and we don't feel like we're working that hard. Is there something that we're missing? And if you remember, my response was like, "Are you complaining, or are you like what's the problem?"
Yeah,
And I saw you laughing in the on the screen as well. As you guys had no previous recruitment experience, so like this sounds luxurious to you. You should have seen where me and you were 10 years ago.
yeah.
You couldn't get all your job done in even a 9 hour day. Like sometimes it was 10, even
For
11
me,
hours. You were
yeah.
in the
Well,
door at 8 and you're
I
leaving at
remember us
7.
both, yeah, both laughing about that. And I think for me, I was like, these guys are doing it in 6 hours. Like, they almost don't know they're born in the nicest way possible with it. And I think for me to be able to do what they did back with the level of experience they've got on paper now, I would be on the phone at 8 in the morning and finish at 7 and probably half an hour for lunch. And I might get to those numbers.
Mm,
But I think that's the problem. I think that sometimes could be the issue with people what put the automation and AI in from the beginning is that they almost don't know how good they've got it. But then you sound like a bit of an old fart saying that because generations before us will tell us we don't know how good we've got it because we don't stand next to the fax machine sending CVs
mm.
all day long. So I suppose that's fair. But
That is the evolution that you spoke about.
yeah, and
Like
that's why I
it's
think it's a real
changed
thing.
now.
I think it's a real thing.
I still find it shocking when I hear recruiters and like, how do you find your clients and candidates? Like, we're cold calling and using job boards. Like, who taught you? Is this somebody teaching you from the 10-year-old
Yeah.
like way of doing recruitment?
And that comes back to sort of why I was keen to sort of identify some of itself because I knew there was a new way of doing it, but I was like, right, I actually only know this way because that's how I've been taught to do the job. I don't know if that's going to serve me well moving forward. It will get me to some point. And the reality was in those very early days, it was I found it difficult, and I don't mind saying that because I was using all of the old school techniques
Mm,
and I found it very difficult with years of experience under my belt. It was only when I then thought, right, let's now look at working in this more modern way and add the experience to it. Let's see if that works forward. So it's a combination of the two, which has probably worked well for me, to be honest, because I've got the experience of knowing what the old process looked like, still having that sprinkled over the top of the new way of working, but yeah, it has changed, and that's why I think this people calling it the third evolution of the industry. I think is 100% a thing.
mm.
There's too
I
much
agree.
evidence now to back it up, and you follow key people on industry figures in on LinkedIn all the time, and some of them have really changed their tune. There's a couple that I've followed, which I won't mention, who have been so anti AI and automation of posts of rants. It's lazy, just best practice, blah 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 blah. We've all read them, and now they're like AI's here to stay. You changed the tune.
I find that.
I find them amusing, and some of the people who obviously you've been in it longer than me, so you must make you laugh. And there's some people we know who have been doing it even longer who it must entertain them because it's starting to entertain me. I know people in industry who I've got a personal sort of relationship with, and they're like, I don't know if I'd go down that path. And I'm like, cool, okay, you can still do you. As I said, you can still do business in the traditional way, but I think in 2025 people try to work smarter, not harder. But it has changed.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know that you were running your own business for, if I remember correctly, 9 months before
Yep.
we started talking.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah.
what what was going through your head when you thought, okay, I'm going to get in contact with Mohammed. I'm going to, ask for some help on anything that you saw.
Yeah, I was searching. So we sort of found each other online, and some of your content I found was quite amusing. But you'd only find it amusing if you'd had the years behind you of the good, the bad, the ugly of working in recruitment. But I had quite a strong opinion of looking for someone who could bring something fresh. I wanted to go down a different path, sort of even down to the company branded. I've purposely gone down the road of making it very current, fresh. And that was the path I wanted. I never had an aspiration of being just another recruitment company. That was what's the point? I might as well just stay at someone else and save the headache and be on someone else's payroll. But it was difficult at the beginning, for sure. A little bit more difficult than I had anticipated. So I certainly sympathise with people who have got very little experience in doing it, but maybe having more experience made it even worse, because I was like, wow, why is it not working for me now, which has served me well over the years? And I then just got to a point of thinking, right, I need to think out of the box here. I need to think differently. I need to think new age. And then yeah, I sort of tripped over finding, as I said, I followed bits and pieces with AI and automation for a while, and algorithms have a wonderful way of sometimes pointing you in the right direction in life. And here we are. Yeah, and it's worked. It's worked well. I think you and I sort of clicked. I spoke to a couple of people about this angle, but you and I just clicked. Common ground was probably our passion for cars.
Yeah. Well, we didn't talk about cars then. We didn't talk about cars then.
Yeah,
That
and
came
I
out
think
later.
I think it just sort of grew from there. And I think one of the questions you asked me at the very beginning was, well, you've got quite a bit of experience, but what is it you asked me the question? I remember you asked me the question, well, what can I do differently? What is it you're looking for? And I was like, I want to work in this new way of working because I think it's the way forward. And it's probably been a learning curve for me, only matched by my first 6 to 12 months in the industry.
You know, I sent you a video to watch before we had a call, and it had like the V-shaped diagram, and then I'll leave a link to this for anybody who's watching it, like V-shaped diagram and an explainer of the structure of the company, how you shift things in.
Yeah.
How well do you think that was? Like, did that make it clearer for you for what you were looking for?
Very much so. It's a good diagram actually, because I think having a visual is really key of knowing what needs to be working and just knowing where you are in that process. Yeah, I think that's a really good visual, that, to be honest. And I've kept that myself because it's good to sometimes use as a bit of a checkpoint, right? Where am I in this process? If I want down the bottom of the end deal, but the bits at the top aren't in place, then go back to the top, focus on that, then the rest of it follow down. So no, I think it's a good visual.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. What about, like there was a moment in time that you described, like, why is this not moving as quickly as I would like? And I've got this wealth of experience, and I know I wanted to try something new.
Yeah.
And the only thing that you knew was like job boards and cold calling and so on. Just on a personal level, how did you feel at that moment in time?
Worried. It's an honest answer. An element of panic probably started to creep in, and I probably started to doubt myself, to be honest. It wasn't quite a tough look because I was thinking, why is it not working? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And yeah, it was quite a tough period. I don't mind sharing that. And it was the being a little bit stumped of thinking, right, why is this not working? Why can I not do what I once did? What am I missing? And yeah, that's when I thought, right, let's try something different. Let's try a new approach. And that was the path I went. But I still do an element of what I've always done, but with the new bits in the mix.
Was there one thing that you like really struggled with? If there was one thing that you really struggled with, what was that?
I think it was sort of doing the classic business development and no one answering the phone. I remember being once thinking, like starting a week thinking, right, I am going to hit this list from top to bottom. And I must have made about 200 dial outs in 2 days of these sort of old fashioned sort of power hours in my diary. And I got absolutely nothing come back. And I was like, wow, okay, that's concerning. At first I thought it was the market, maybe in there a little bit, not really anywhere near as bad as I thought it was. It was things had changed. And when I started to sort of automate things and more connecting with people on email, hey, I didn't get an absolute wave of people coming back to me saying, oh, where have you been? Thanks for your email. But that didn't happen. But over a course of a week and a month, all of a sudden I was like, right, now I've got an element of volume to work off. And that probably took 6 to 8 weeks of starting to automate some real basic bits before that started to turn. It wasn't overnight. I remember setting all the bits and pieces up with you, and I almost sat there watching my laptop for things to happen instantly, which it doesn't. It takes a little time.
We're Amazon Prime culture now. We're used to it. We're used to next day
Yeah,
delivery.
exactly. So yeah, probably about 6 to 8 weeks, and all of a sudden it just built day by day, week by week, and I was like, right, okay, this is now how people communicate. But then if you really strip it back, basically, who doesn't communicate with friends and family more over WhatsApp and FaceTime than they did 3 4 years ago? You and I, we messaged each other more over a sort of a phone and messaging channels rather than an old-fashioned conversation over the phone, and that's how people behave in
World.
life, isn't it? Yeah, that's real life. People organize gatherings of friends and family by setting up WhatsApp groups. Well, it wasn't that many years ago where people that would have been unheard of. So the world's changed, and why wouldn't the business world change with it?
I can still remember getting a wedding invite on as a Facebook event, and I
Yeah,
was like, "Whoa, this is this is a different level of stuff." Like I'm used to receiving like a card or a really nice like kind of written invitation, and a
yeah,
Facebook event. Okay, this is something a little bit different. Okay, you know that one thing that I'm always quite protective of. You know, I'm a family man. I've shared a few times. I've got a child with special needs. Like I'm not in a position to work full time,
yeah,
and I know when things get stressful, like it has an impact on the conversations I have with the missus, and then
yeah,
like how we are with family and so on. And I'm always very protective of things that might have negative impact, and and I do my best to protect it.
yeah,
So that means like notifications on my phone are turned off. Like I don't check emails first thing in the morning. There's a certain point in time like nobody can get through to me. My phone goes into black and white mode, airplane mode, at certain times of the day, certainly in focus times. But when you're in the earlier stages and you have to be really engrossed in the business, you're front facing with all the negative thoughts and the negative feelings like you mentioned earlier.
mm,
You're a family man as much as I am.
yeah.
Did that impact you personally in that moment?
Massively. I'm rubbish at those scenarios. It's definitely my area of improvement. Probably the one tool I now use, which I didn't use 7 8 months ago, which has helped, is Slack, because it's got a setting which is a little bit more user friendly in terms of your working day. Massively my area of improvement. I'm nowhere near where I would like to be on that type of topic. Yeah, that's not my
Mm.
strong point. I want it to be. I find it very difficult. I'm definitely the guy now who still takes my work home with me. I'm still going to be checking LinkedIn and emails of an evening where I shouldn't be. Um,
Mm.
it's a work in progress. I'm not that guy yet. I want to be, but I'm not there yet. But
I,
Slack, using Slack for day-to-day communication within the business has helped,
you
which
were using email before, weren't you?
I was using WhatsApp, but it was you who said, Paul, just use it. And I was like, oh, really? But it's the same as WhatsApp. And he went, yeah, I know, but it will help you. And I was like, okay, fine. I reluctantly started to use it. But yeah, anything can work now is on Slack. And it's I feel like the app's not as pushy as WhatsApp. If you get a message, if you don't respond, it pings you to say you haven't answered the message, or you get the blue tick where you feel obliged if you've blue ticked the message to then reply because you look rude to not reply. But Slack on work stuff has definitely helped, but
Mm.
it's definitely my area of improvement, 100%.
I think the key lesson, just for anybody who's listening, just do this. If you've got internal communications taking place, like your emails are for external communication, WhatsApp is for personal friends and family and everything else. Slack
Yeah,
is only for work, and do
yeah,
not let them mix, basically. So I set it as really, really firm and strict rules. If I've got a colleague who messages me about work on WhatsApp, you're not getting a reply. Needs to be on Slack. If you email me, not getting a reply. Needs to be on Slack. And email is just for clients. Emails for clients, Slack for internal communication, WhatsApp for personal. Like if we're organizing a get together, like we spoke about car events and
mm,
Goodwood
yeah,
Festival of Speed, which is something that we're organizing. Yeah, cool. We'll do a WhatsApp group, no problem. But if it's something urgent work related, the chances are I'm not going to look at WhatsApp during the day.
yeah,
Like my mum said it to me a couple of times. She'll call me, it's fine, but if she WhatsApps me, sometimes I just don't go on WhatsApp for a few days, And she's, do I need a Calendly link, or do I need to make an appointment with you before I can have a message you? I'm like, the WhatsApp is like that. But if you call me, I'll pick it up.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing joke. But you've got to be really firm on that, and that's why I was saying it at the time, that you need to separate what is personal and professional, because if an internal colleague is WhatsApping you about something work related, and then you're getting a shopping list from the missus at the same time, it's like you can't separate between what is important and what's not. Whereas Slack is like, it just makes it clear, okay, cool, whatever comes through on Slack, it's important, jump on it. Even then, you can have certain channels in Slack where you're like, okay, that conversation is taking place there, I don't need to be involved in it. You don't need to worry about it. So that was why. So there's some wisdom for anyone and everyone who's watching, is just separate your communication channels from what is personal and professional. So do you remember how you actually find me?
Yes, Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, some of your posts on there, and I think it came into our Riven, and yeah, I thought some of the content was very relatable. Some of it actually I found quite comical, to be honest, with some of the bits you put, like in the early days of sort of the tough side of recruitment. And yeah, I think that was it. And I thought, okay, this is relatable. And I think that's when I just started to follow you initially in that. And then
How long
I
were you
think there was,
following me for before you booked in?
3 months. Yeah, quite a while. And then I think I liked the post, which, because I found it tickled my humor. And I think you'd have only found it funny if you'd had years under your belt in recruitment. And then I think you've messaged me saying, what is it you do? Clearly you're in recruitment to have found that funny. Otherwise it just wouldn't have been relevant to anyone. And then we, messaged me and said, look, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And the rest is history, really.
That's it. So I'm curious to know, like, your experience of working with me. What was the process like, and how did you find it?
Yeah, it's been really good. I think the only part I found a little bit more difficult was the sort of the online video bits at the beginning. It took me a little while to get my head around that mindset of, right, these are the instructions on here. I think at the beginning I found that a little bit difficult, but then light bulb moment, right, I've just watched that video, I didn't quite understand it. Right, just push play at the beginning again.
Okay.
And it solves the problem. And that was just a personal mental thing, to be honest, of learning this new part of the job, the industry, off a video. And it took me a little while to get my head around it. Now it's second nature. When you send each other sort of Loom videos and bits and pieces, it's normal. But again, that's the technical world we're living in now, where I can just send a message, right, I've done this isn't working. I've got this error message come up. What am I looking at? Record it, send it to you. You send my back, right, you haven't ticked that button, etc., etc. Boom, done. It's just a new world. But yeah, that was a little bit at the beginning. I found just a new way of working. The rest of it I found good. We've built a good rapport. You sometimes, I think, have held me accountable for things I've said I'm going to do and not done. There were certain bits with timescales at the beginning. He was like, well, you need to get that done by this week. Otherwise, you're not going to have that. Then we had the scenario, which I'm surprised you haven't mentioned yet, with the VA. Or you've been waiting to ask me this question.
We'll come on to that. But you can mention it.
Yeah, that was something I really, really wasn't on board with at the beginning. I was like, I'm not buying that part. The rest of it, cool, this is good. I'm really not buying into having someone help me from the other side of the world. I just couldn't see how on earth it was going to work. I was wrong, wasn't I?
Are you okay with, like, you paid for the service? Well, you had some one-on-one calls with me as well. Are you okay if I find some of those clips where, because I can see the moments where you were struggling to get your head around it, and then a week later, oh my gosh, this is amazing. and then if I can find those clips, if you're okay with it, I'll put them towards the end of the video. Is he like?
It was like that, and the VA part was probably the one, because there was, for a good few weeks, I think you were saying, right, have you done this? Have you done that? And I was like, no, and I was definitely putting it off. I was like, I'm not really buying into that. I don't want to do that. The rest of it I like. And then I think you highlighted someone on LinkedIn and sent me their profile and said, look, this could be a good fit for you. It looks like they've come available. And I must admit, I did do it straight away. And I was like, just because I can say I done it. And it was like, fine. And that was literally my mindset. I had the call, and then we went through a little bit of the questions to ask on the call, quite some basic, just qualification questions. And she answered the questions easily. And I remember one of the ones you said to check was their speed of their internet. and the speed was faster than mine. And I was like, okay, I don't need to worry about that. And I just then just thought, okay, I'm just going to go along with this and just see. And I remember you saying to me, just given some tasks which they can't break, they either work and they give you the information, data, whatever it is, or they won't. There's nothing they're going to do which is going to have an impact negatively. And I did I think a 2-day trial, and I was amazed of how fast they could work. And now, 5 months later, I don't know what I would do without them. I sometimes fall into the trap of forgetting certain things I can hand over to them, but anything operational, anything email, I'm admin based. I just on Slack say, can you do this? Come back, yes.
Slack, and they've done it.
Yeah. And literally how quick they can do certain tasks. It would take me building sort of like stripping leads lists, saying it would take me a week. It just would. And I've got it done and in my inbox, perfect first time within an hour. And at the beginning, I used to send sort of Loom videos of the task. Sometimes I do that so I've got it for the future as like a training material. But half the time, we just pick up just jump on Teams. We always have a quick Teams call once a week on Friday morning. And 90% of the time, I just send it to her on Slack. Sometimes I do it as a voice note on Slack. And I say that any problems, come back to me, give me a call. Sometimes I feel like she goes, oh, I got it the first time. You don't need to send the video of like how to do it. I understand this stuff. It's really easy. And I'm like, brilliant. But yeah, probably one of the best hires I've ever made in terms of their value.
Pleased to hear that. Pleased to hear that. I think that I just remember going through it myself, and there was a fear element of, are we going to give access to our accounts to somebody who's on the other side of the world, and what could they do? I'm like, well, what could they do? They send an invoice. They send an invoice out. They
Yeah.
send the wrong invoice. They send the wrong price on the invoice. What's the worst that can possibly happen? And there's a fear of things going wrong that people tend to focus on, and there's actually a lot more that goes right than goes wrong.
Yeah.
So
Those same risks. Yeah, those risks there, like in terms of sort of having access to invoicing, potentially even bank accounts. But that's going to be the exact same if you're going to hire someone local. That risk is still there.
mm, absolutely.
And if you hire someone from an operational basis locally today, you're still probably going to have an element of that individual working hybrid. So there isn't really a difference. Yes, there is a slight element of risk, I think, with some tasks, yes, but you build it up. You build it up over straight away. I didn't give over any sensitive information and bits and pieces right at the early day. That's taken time. I've only recently now she has complete access to my inbox. Again, there's not really a huge amount in there of any real sensitivity. Probably the most sensitive thing I have in that inbox is probably her own invoices.
Yeah,
You
if
can't
she
do
knows.
anything. Yeah, yeah, it's certainly a way forward. Sometimes she's even happy to work on my time zone, which is very, very rare. I actually ask for that for her. I that isn't my expectation. But she's even come to some table with some ideas and said, well, have you thought about doing certain tasks in a different order? And I'm thinking, I didn't even think of that. And she goes, well, let me put something together for you, and then we catch up on Friday. I'll walk you through the process. And I'm like, yeah, great. I hadn't even thought
Got
of it.
yourself a brilliant on there.
Yeah, maybe I've got a little bit lucky, but she's, it's just easy.
Mm, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm curious to know as well, while you were going through the process, like you mentioned, there were a couple of times where you watched a video and you didn't quite get it, and then you watched it again.
Yeah.
Was that because of like the delivery of like how I presented the video, or
Uh,
was it just because it was new information?
New information, you've got to try and absorb it. Some of them, from a personal level, they sort of rattled along quite quickly. There was a couple where I must have gone backwards and forwards, like literally, and I was like, right, follow that. Okay, go back 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Right, go back a minute. Cool, let's do that again. So probably more of a pull problem than a delivery aspect of it, to be honest, because it was a new way of working. But if we'd have been in an office training room, it'd have been the exact same as saying, sorry, mate, could you just repeat what you just did then? Yeah, okay, cool, right, go back and do it again. It isn't really, it's the same concept.
Mm,
Instead of me saying, could you just repeat what you just said? I just rewound the video.
mm. So I want to explain to you like how, from a delivery perspective, from my thoughts were, I only make videos on things that I know I'm going to have to repeat. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, cool. Well, here's the training. Everything else is on a call. And then
Yeah.
it just helps speed up the process, because if there's a week between us having a conversation, you getting stuck on something for a week is too long. Like
Yeah.
we need to get through that quicker. And well, we want to be moving at pace at the end of the day, because you want to implement things as quickly and fast as you possibly can. So that's how it came together. But on that note, was there ever a moment where you felt like stuck or unsure about anything?
Yes, there was one particular day where I just thought, oh my God, like my head's exploding. But I knew it was probably something really simple. And I remember just messaging you and I was like, I just want someone to watch through. And you called me and you just said, I'll call you in 10 minutes. And you called me and I'm going, right. And you were out. I knew I could hear by the background noise. You wasn't in an office or anything, but you could visualize what I was looking at. And you was like, right, what can you see in front of you? And I was like, right, this. Right. Okay. If you looked in, like, you've gone there and you've got, and all it was something I just hadn't connected email addresses to an email campaign. I was like, oh, and we laughed. So simple. But yeah, that was probably the only occasion where I was like, oh, I'm now, and it was Friday afternoon and I was getting frustrated. And I think you probably detected my frustration. You went, I'll call you in 10 minutes. You phoned me. You knew you was able to visualize what I could see in front of me. And it was something so simple of not connecting email addresses for an email campaign. Well, it's not going to work without email addresses, right? And
Well,
then as soon as they
it's all
were
been
on, I was
made a lot
like,
easier since
perfect.
then.
Yeah. And yeah, that was probably the time when I probably struggled the most, which was quite early on. It was only the first couple of weeks of just the infrastructure set up where I just got a little bit rabbit in headlights. I just couldn't work out what was wrong. I knew it was something simple. I knew it was going to be. Then 10 minutes later, my world is sunshine and flowers again.
Well, you got everything implemented in the best part of 6 weeks, basically. Like
Yeah,
it
six,
was
seven
all done
weeks.
in the
Yeah,
timely manner. I want to ask you this question as well. Like going back to your 750 and 1.4 million days,
yeah.
imagine you had all the knowledge and experience that you gained in that 6 week period and you applied it to those businesses. What do you think they would have looked like?
Whoosh. I probably wouldn't need to be on this phone call.
Yeah.
My God, what would that look like? Jesus, I'd be out. I wouldn't need to be in recruitment. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I probably would be that person sitting on the beach somewhere, maybe, or certainly getting close to it. My God, if I visualize now, sort of some of the offices I worked in a very traditional sort of recruitment offices of rows of desks, bits and pieces, it wouldn't even be difficult to sort of pitch the solution to an owner or sort of a P&L holder, because I had teams where everyone had their just recruiter license, which would have been probably anywhere between 3-4 grand per head. Then all the job boards, just visualizing another bit of Christ, the outgoings per head. Yeah, this wouldn't have been easy. This would not have been difficult to have been able to sell in, of saying, we don't need all of that. I'm going to put this in. But how quick it would have been like having the team twice the size as in terms of physical bums on seats, maybe even 3 times,
Mhm.
but without possibly even a lower expenditure. Or a worst case scenario, they the outgoings of a 10-man team for an output of a 30-man team.
Wow. And do you think that would have followed straight into the billings?
Yeah, I think it would have. And I think it would have created a completely different working environment. I know I've definitely been one of those people over the years where you work long hours in recruitment, you go through phases where you get a bit burnt out, you're just worn out. The second half of November and December was one I knew I used to always struggle in that period. I just used to get tired. And if I had a summer holiday and booked in the summer, the 2 weeks before, I'd run out of steam.
Mhm.
And because I worked long hours, it wasn't a 40-hour week, it was a 60, 70 plus hour week. If you put all these systems in and you made it, you could still make it quite a structured 9 to 5 working environment. I think that could only help, to be honest. The reason why recruitment's long hours, because you've got a lot of things to do every day of the week, where if all of a sudden some of these repetitive tasks are just moved over and they're done in the background for you, dare I say you can have a work-life balance in recruitment. That sounds weird to say, isn't it? But
Yeah.
maybe. But it would make a massive difference. And but I think some of those companies today who are still in that traditional model, I think there's too much of a fear factor of changing. They won't change what they all. So you see some of the big corporate recruitment companies reporting big losses, but they're doing exactly what they've always done. Well, the world's so, but it's a brave decision if you're C-level in those type of companies to completely change the way you're working is quite a brave decision at the same time. It's easy when you're a small startup because you've got that you're agile, you can do it, and you don't really have anyone to answer to, and there isn't really too much of a fallout if it goes wrong. So I do understand why these big companies don't,
Mm.
but if it, yeah, those would do. Oof.
Do you think there might be an element of confusion in it because of the amount of tech that's available now? Like, at the end of the day, it has exploded over the last few years, and I can just imagine, like, if if I was going through the exact same journey that you've been through now,
Yeah,
and looking at it on my own, I would have just got lost in the amount of tech that's available. Do I do this
yeah.
first? Do I try that first? I want to take one thing and then get it perfectly right, and then move on, stack the next thing on top. And we've had conversations about like all sorts of tools, and I've said like, okay, that one's unnecessary because this is the process that you're trying to deliver on. We don't need that. We only
Yeah,
need this. Okay, cool. All of them work in their own right, but you've got to make a sensible decision, like just from an ROI perspective, from an implementation perspective, from a disruption perspective. And when you consider all of those things, I believe there is an element of confusion
yeah,
because of the amount that's available.
absolutely. And I see loads of things on LinkedIn where there's people selling solutions of it, but I think they're purposely confusing people, and then they're using that as their buy-in to a load of people throw out all the logos. Fine, you're going to work out who they are. You can go online and buy their products within 5 minutes flat. Great. Can you use it? And there's a lot. Yeah, you can get absolutely lost, and I think that's actually getting worse. I think for the recruitment industry, for me, there is a tech stack. Yes, there's some bits which potentially you can bolt on either side, but it's quite a straightforward tech stack. There's some people who are probably over complicating it, over automating it. And I think that's probably where the fear factor comes in. And then I also think there's the fear factor of people thinking, oh, AI is going to take my job.
Mm,
No, I don't think so. But AI will take your job if you don't move with AI.
mm.
I think I see it that way around. But you can definitely get lost in the tech stack very, very easily.
What advice would you give to somebody who's like in the process of adopting some tech and they're potentially lost, or yeah, if they're in that
Um,
process, what would you say
yeah,
to them?
I think one of the best things I think I've done is go to someone yourself and sort of by the knowledge of what's going to work. Yeah, I could have not done it and then just Googled it for forever and a day and found these tools, done all the free trials, which funny enough, I don't think any of these free trials really work. We've had that conversation. Everyone can give you a free trial, but the product doesn't really work until you put your bank details in. But you don't know what's going to work. I think just if you're going to go down that path, find someone who's been there, done it, and get them to do it. Put the infrastructure in for you, rather than trying to work it out for yourself. I think you're losing time, and the aspect of it is, as an industry, people are probably implementing it and going with it at a huge rate on a day-to-day basis. You're going to get left behind
Mm,
for what it's going to cost you to find someone to actually pinpoint you in the right direction. If you get that right and at the right time and then you execute it, you can make that money back quite
I think
quickly, to be honest.
I think I can say that about you in the sense that you've got a wealth of experience, and I mentioned earlier on that there's a certain point in time where people would feel comfortable. Like you already had that experience,
Yeah,
and I'm going to say like as an entrepreneur, as a recruiter, as a business owner, like there's an element of ego that comes into it. Do I really need this, and so on. And if you don't mind me saying this, I think you're somebody who just dropped the ego and said, okay, cool, I want to figure this out. I want to do it quickly, and you got it done quickly.
yeah,
And I'd say for anybody who who is going through similar kind of challenges to what you've shared. Like just be like you, basically. Be the person who's prepared to learn and drop the ego, and you'll be onto a winning streak.
Yeah, and it was difficult. Those first 6, 8 weeks setting it all up, like it wasn't easy. I didn't find it easy, but to be honest, the job's not easy. It wasn't easy when I first started off in the first 6, 8 weeks. That was probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And I remember going home with like your brain swelling, I thinking I can't take any more information in. Well, setting it all up did remind me a little bit of it, but yeah, there'll be people who will still dig their heels in and say, no, 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 it's not going to work. It's a phase. Well, that's okay. That's fine. That's their decision. That's their business model. That's fine. It's not mine. I don't want it to be. But yeah, I think it's put things in a very different position for me. And yeah, I tried best as possible as I could to not like for me, I thought what I'd done in the past, some of it wasn't relevant anymore. It was like, and I remember joining a company who was one of the companies I joined years ago was a main competitor who I had previously working with. No one cared what I'd done in the past because it counted for nothing in that company, and I was absolutely starting from scratch, and that's fine. And that was exactly as it was. So when you do things new or you change things in the job, yeah, I was learning something.
It's
Something.
it's the evolution of the job, just as you described. I'm going to give this example, Paul, and then I want to slowly start bringing this conversation to a close. The example that I give, even for those working with me, is that you got to equate it to like building a house. It could take a year to build a house, and if you haven't got the foundations in place, and it doesn't matter how tall it is or how many floors you have, like it's going to be built on weak foundations. But there's another journey to it as well, and that is that along the way there are going to be rainy days and cold days, and if you're there building it and you hate the whole building process, by the time you get to a point where the house looks like everything that you dreamed of, you end up resenting it because you just think this put me through so much pain. And I always say that, stick to the process, but try your best to look forward to what you're building, because it's what you're building that's the goal. And yes, it might be painful right now, and you might be getting drenched in the rain while putting bricks together and so on, but it's going to pay off in the long term. Just if you complain about it all the way through, then you end up resenting it right at the end. So I think sometimes that's hard to see when you're in the midst of it. So okay, Paul, what would you say to somebody who is thinking about working with me and might be on the fence?
Do it. Just go for it. I remember when we had the call where I was going to make a decision. In the end, it was just I just trusted my gut and just went for it. To be honest, I can't see how anyone will. If it doesn't work, I think it's going to be on them
Mm.
because the planning, even since we've been working together, the platform has evolved and it's better now than. Not saying it was anything wrong with it at the beginning, but it's definitely evolved. And just follow it. Like you've put things in a certain order for a particular reason. So literally just use it as a tick list and go, right, start at the top and just literally work your way through. And yeah, I think just go for it, to be honest. If you've made the decision to more often not set up your own business, we've already made that big decision. This isn't anywhere near that level of boldness, I don't think. Or I don't think, not for me, it hasn't been. And then just go with it. I don't think you'll regret it. If it doesn't work, sorry, I think it's going to be on the other person, to be honest.
Mm. I think there's two parts to it. Like one is the business side of it, and then there's the tactical elements that come into recruitment. Obviously,
Yeah.
you get both of them from me.
Yeah.
What do you think about my experience in recruitment from a tactical recruitment perspective? Because you would
Yeah.
see me offer that advice.
Yeah. I like the way you've structured your business works. You're quite open of what's worked and on occasions what hasn't worked. And that's for myself, probably being one of the more experienced people in the program, is that's always interesting to see. More, the mechanics of that is just more than just doing placements. It's the wraparound of the business, and it works. We've worked very different niches, very different markets completely, but most things correlate, to be honest. Probably only slight difference is probably that I've done more of the continental Europe rather than yourself being UK based, where you've got slightly different cultures and humour across Europe. But apart from that, everything's transferable.
Is there any kind of like geographic, regional niche, anything that you feel like this, what my help wouldn't suit or it wouldn't work?
I doubt it. I can't think of one where it wouldn't. If the job still is the same in its fundamentals. So, in all four corners of the world, if you're trying to find clients to then pitch in a candidate and get a fee from placing a candidate into a job, which is the job in its most basic terms, and a business dating agency or aspect of it, then no, I couldn't think of one. There might be very slight tweaks in different niches in terms of messaging of people, maybe. I'm in IT, someone doing, I don't know, end of the spectrum, healthcare, maybe, for example, your messaging might be slightly different in language. But again, I'm guessing because I don't know that market.
We allow for it.
Pardon?
We allow for the tweaks.
Yeah, so you would. So exactly, sort of all the messaging you do, even if you're putting it into an automated process, well, I'm still writing the message, so no one's going to know their niche better than the individual working it. So they're going to know what's gonna work and what's not. So I can't see it, to be honest. If you're going to be using, look at things like LinkedIn, well, that works for every sector, doesn't it, from a recruitment perspective? So why doesn't this? No, I don't think so. I can't think of one.
Paul, I've actually really enjoyed this conversation. I want to keep talking to you because I feel like there's a wealth of knowledge that everybody can benefit from. So maybe we'll plan a round 2 at some point.
Yeah.
But if it's okay with you, I want to draw it to a close. And if there's anything else that you want to say or add on, over to you.
No, I think from my point of view, I'm just so glad I did it last year, to be honest. It was something which took a little while for me to get to decision and think, right, I'm actually going to find someone and do this. I'm so glad I did it. Not everyone thought it was a good idea, but I'm absolutely fine with that because it definitely worked for me. And it's been good, and it will continue.
That's it. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the success of your business, and yeah, we'll continue working together as long as that carries on.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Cheers. Thank you. I'm the first man, I don't have any patience. I was just never blessed with that skill set. We've got everything starting to build in last week. I did take Friday off for holiday reasons. My jaw hit the floor with how many responses I had on Monday morning, where I was almost like, oh my God, I now don't know what I'm going to do. I'm having to change my plans for the whole day because I'm just going to have to go through this list. And me and Mo had a call yesterday and I was like, I don't know what to do with all these people who have come back, which I know sounded so stupid, but I felt like I was slightly overwhelmed by it. I'm only just now, Wednesday mid-morning, getting on top of it. Yeah, it started to really build a lot quicker than what I thought it would. And I don't think we're even executing fully phase 1 yet. So if you didn't have Mo sort of teaching you all the steps with this, I don't know about you, but for me, it wouldn't have worked. I could go on board. I knew what it was before I joined the program, but would I ever be where I am today without someone actually coaching me and training me from step A to Z? No. And I've got people in the industry who are like, yeah, I'm just going to go and buy, and I'm going to do it myself without any training. Well, I'm looking at it and thinking, what a waste of money, because if you don't know how to work the sequences, how you want it to work, and all those tiny little bits of attention to detail, I don't think they're going to get a fraction of the response we do. We've got a 50 to 55% acceptance rate on our campaigns. Like, that is unbelievably good. And the network we've grown, I could have only dreamed of. Like, it's been so good for us.